Now, Lyle's been doing the research into our next story.
It's about a tiny skeleton and the man who owns it. He believes that he and his family have been the victims of its curse, a belief so powerful he was too frightened to be interviewed for our film. So he agreed not to give his real name. We used an actor in his place. He did, however, provide us with a signed statement that confirms the story you're about to see is true. The people of Brixham, with their long seafaring tradition, must have heard many strange tales over the centuries. But few can have been stranger than that told to us by fish merchant Tom Woods. His story starts in 1975 with an intriguing discovery in an old cottage.
This builder I knew showed me a casket he found hidden in a wall. Inside the casket was a tiny skeleton that was about 10 inches long. I'd never seen anything like it. I said I'd buy it off him. I've always been interested in things like that, and I thought it might be a good investment. I kept it in the attic, facing the wall, just like it had been found. For 8 years, nobody touched it or looked at it, and it gave us no trouble.
Then Tom made a mistake. He took the skeleton to work, where it naturally attracted the curiosity of his staff. The first was foreman Ray Prentice.
I told him not to touch it, but he did. And the next weekend he was coming back from London in a car with 3 other men when there was a head-on crash. He was killed instantly. The other 3 men survived.
By now, Tom Woods suspected there was some kind of evil in the skeleton, so he decided to sell it through a friend, auctioneer Godfrey Banks.
I'd taken to hanging a crucifix around the casket, and I said to Godfrey, don't open the casket and keep the chain and the cross on it. Hello? Then a few days later he phoned me at work, and he said, just get the skeleton out of here. I don't want it on the premises.
Don't worry, mate, I'll be around.
Then later on, I had a phone call that evening to say that he'd been found hanging in the bathroom. And there was no note, no reason, to this day, nobody knows why he did it. But I do know that he touched the skeleton.
Tom turned for help to Graham Wiley, a local psychic investigator, because by now he was convinced that the skeleton was having an evil influence on anyone who touched it.
I was in Tom's premises one day and he asked if we could have a quiet word. We went upstairs and immediately I sensed the presence of evil emanating. He began to relate bizarre occurrences that happened over the years and asked if I could lift a curse from his family and close friends. He was genuinely terrified. I realized at that time my best opportunity would be to take this to a medium, a close friend of mine called Margaret Barrett. But I was amazed by the story that she told me that had come to her from the spirit world.
William Young is my name, and I was born in Brixham in 1699. I went to sea on a cargo ship. On one voyage we docked at a port in Gambia and went ashore. One of the natives was a witch doctor, and he said he would put a curse on me. I was 5 feet 11 inches tall when I was at sea, but when I died in 1747, I was 48 years old and only 10 inches high.
I didn't tell Tom what the medium had said. I told him that it would be safer in my possession, but as he was a lot calmer now, he declined the offer and said he would keep it. I heard nothing from Tom for about a year, and I was in the shop one day, and he told me that since I had returned it to him, all hell had broken loose.
The first thing that happened was that the son of a good friend of mine had his throat cut in a nightclub. He touched the skeleton not 24 hours earlier. Then my nephew took the skeleton out of the casket without my permission. The next day he attacked my foreman with a knife. He was shaking, staring, the lad was. He was in a terrible state. And then it struck my son. Within 6 weeks of touching the skeleton, he suffered massive bleeding and collapsed.
Tom was in an awful state, So naturally I agreed to take it away, as I am protected with my psychic gift. After taking it away, nothing untoward happened.
We decided to begin our investigation by looking for historical or scientific evidence for a William Young, or of such a curse. First we went to the Museum of Mankind to find out about African witch doctors.
The actual powers that witches have vary enormously. Shrinking of bodies, however, no, I've never ever heard of that mentioned in Africa. The thing about bones in an African worldview is that they're pure, incorruptible, unchanging. They can't be changed, they can't be shrunk, and that's why they're important.
At the Devon Records Office we asked about evidence of a William Young having lived in Brixham.
I checked the International Genealogical Index, which is supposed to cover baptisms at Brixham in the 1690s, and I found no relevant entry. To make doubly sure, I checked the original register for baptisms, found nothing there, and I also checked the burials there for the 1740s and did not find anything suitable. And so I think we have to conclude that the baptism and the burial are not recorded in Brixham Parish Register.
So does a Home Office pathologist think the skeleton could be a shrunken man?
I've never seen anything like this before in this setting. What I have seen is similar objects within anatomical museums in the teaching hospitals. Looking at the remains, it's clearly that of a fetus of the order of between 5 and 6 months. I came to that assessment in detail by looking at 2 areas, one of which was the tympanic ring, the other was the development of the jaws and the teeth, indicating this was not a mature infant.
So according to our experts, there's no record of a William Young living in Brixham. The skeleton is definitely that of a preterm baby, possibly prepared as a teaching aid. But it's definitely not a shrunken man. For Tom Woods, does this demolish the story of the curse?
I don't care whether the skeleton's a shrunken man or a doctor's model or whatever it is. All I know is that what I experienced is real. That skeleton is evil, and I just want it out of my life forever.
Well, I must say I wouldn't touch that myself. I don't know. So many dreadful things have happened to it. I'm glad we took the decision not to have that skeleton in the studio. Susan, what do you think? Is it cursed?
Well, it's a horrible looking thing, isn't it? And
Yeah.
I think that's probably a large part of it. People can be cursed, people can even die of curses, but I think only if they know about it. I'm very sceptical about the idea that the skeleton itself is carrying evil. I think it can only work psychosomatically when people think they're being cursed.
So this is like voodoo with the old African tribes where somebody's told that something's going to happen, they're going to be very ill, or they're going to die, and they do.
Yes, I think that can happen, but I don't think some inanimate object can be the carrier of evil.
Do you think it's a self-fulfilling prophecy at work here, Lyle, or a curse?
I think there's something in that. We can become accidents just looking for a place to happen. That does happen to us if we think too hard about it. But I have a feeling there's something more going on here. I think that by coming into contact with things, we leave what amounts to emotional fingerprints on them. This watch I wear is very different from a similar watch from a factory. This is, I think, now has part of me. Perhaps even part that can be scientifically measured, and which can be appreciated by someone who doesn't even know me. So I think Tom, whatever else the history of this object is, Tom is infecting it in some way. He's laying so much heavy baggage on this poor little thing that even if people don't know the story, I think they will feel something of this attached to it.
Tom's tried to sell this thing a few times. He simply doesn't seem to be able to get rid of it. What would you do with it?
Oh, well, it's a horrid thing. I wouldn't particularly like it, but I would be fascinated to test it because my ideas could be tested. I'd be willing to touch it and see what happened to me.
What about you?
I'm fascinated by it too, but I think Tom should get rid of it. It's no point in trying to sell it and pass the contract on. That's just black magic. What I would advise him to do, we have to deal with his emotions, not the thing now. Whether that's good or bad now is immaterial. Tom is in trouble. I suggest that he treats it as a dead baby. Very simple, and do what you would do for a dead baby. You give it a decent burial. I said, Tom, if you're listening, find yourself a friendly priest and give this thing a good ceremonial send-off. I think that'll help.